Yeah. Before I introduce our program for tonight, I want to remind you that next meeting is going to be show and tell. So bring anything that you think would be of interest to the rest of the members. Stories, anecdotes, radios, anything radio related. Our talk tonight is going to be given by Ludwell Sibling, and it's on lightning. I was supposed to give a speech on the horn speaker, and I guess the situation there for the horn speakers. October. And I will shoot you what you should do to avoid having to do things to them. And give you some horror stories, show you some goodies affected by lightning. Lightning is good, scary stuff. We know it kills people, we know it's spectacular, and then we've all survived to adulthood without getting hit, for most of us anyway, without getting hit by the stuff. So let's have some fun with lightning tonight. First of all, let me give you the scare stuff. In the New York Times back in July, there was a little brief item, 5 essential ticked items to it dealing with lightning. You can read that to you just for some scale. July 14th we're talking about. Lightning, the crackling raptor. 1. Prime lightning season starts right about now, so know this. Between 1940 and 1991, atmospheric bolts killed more Americans, 8,300, than tornadoes, 5,700, or floods, 15. 2. Strike channel temperatures, that is the temperature of the ionized gas where the lightning is actually passing through the air, can hit 60,000 degrees. Now, the surface of the sun is about 6,000 degrees, so that's a scary amount of heat. 3. In a typical year, lightning causes 20,000 residential blazes. I live in Harrington County, and sure, every time there's a storm, the fire siren goes off. 4. The worst known lightning disaster occurred in 1963 when 81 people died in a zapped Boeing that crashed through Elton, Maryland. 5. Steve Marshburn, founder of Lightning Strike and Electric Shock Victims International support group, was hit while working inside a bank. The bolt entered through a drive-in teller's ungrounded speaker. Lightning, he says, can find you anywhere. Okay, that's the spooky stuff. Let's look at some of the... Yes, sir. Planes routinely get hit. They usually survive, obviously. But if something went wrong, if the engine got jammed or something like that, and crack. Yes? The engines are blown literally through the wing of an airplane. Sure enough. Yeah. Even a plane in the air. I think on this sort of fuel thing out here, something like that, would be more serious than usual. The best spot for lightning is the East Corner in Australia. Where's the lightning storm? Okay, Florida looks pretty well. Okay, now lightning, of course, can pop up anywhere. It doesn't play favorites. There's no particular salvation for anyone. For example, I used to live across the street from the local rabbi. You think anybody be safe? Well, his TV set that's on. So anybody can do it. Our man Alan Place in the club here, we lost a clear motive last week. His house is at the end of about a 400-foot buried telephone entrance cable. So the fact of the cable being buried didn't help me. That's like I said, okay. A friend of mine lost an answering set, a bunch of phones a couple of years ago. Same deal. Storm came up in the middle of the night, exactly, yeah. As an example of what lightning can do, this is a piece of coaxial cable. This is typical AT&T long line stuff from the middle 50s. It's a 12-tube cable. These things were typically buried 3 or 4 feet underground, which got them some lightning protection. Also, they typically had a pair of shield wires buried above the cable in hopes of protecting the cable from whatever lightning came in the blade of the cable. Yet, this one got hit. If you take off because it's missing the lead sheath. Underneath the lead sheath was a plastic sheet. Sure, here's this nice quarter-inch hole sort of melted through the plastic. And inside there was this little burn line. Sure enough. They got heated up and cut open. I'll pass this around for your entertainment board. switchboard operator and radio dispatcher for a timber protected association in Idaho that is a firefighting group. And at her switchboard, she had 6 or 8 country phone lines coming in from the fire towers all around the county. These are one-wire lines. You turn the crank and sure enough, there are answers. The idea being, of course, that each fire tower could call down as to where the fires were, storms going on. Now, naturally, the time you need the telephone most desperately is when the lightning storm is going on and starting all the fires. But that's the most dangerous time to use the phone, obviously. So what you do up on the tower is you stand on one of these stools and you insulate it for 20,000 volts with glass insulators, and then you use the phone. And you're relatively safe at that point. Now this relic is an old timer. It's cut from a piece of 14-inch plank, so it's real old-time wood in real old-time forest. And it's a genuine relic. But that would keep you safe in the storm, up in a 8,000 foot elevation. All except phase. Nothing makes them. Okay. Let's look at a typical problem involving lightning striking something. Let's have ourselves a radio tower. This could be a cable mast or any other piece of metal sticking up in the air. Let's have a nice tower. Any light, that doesn't matter. Now let's do what the electrical code tells us to do and put a ground on this tower for safety. Let's drive in a nice deep ground rod. We'll put a really good ground in here so we get maybe 10 ohms of ground resistance. Let's maybe put in 2 or 3 rods of parallel resistance down. If you really work hard, you can get a resistance of maybe 10 ohms. Now, the average lightning strike is about 50,000 amps. A really light one is maybe 10,000. Really heavy lightning strikes 100,000. 50,000 amps. That's a fair amount of current. Okay, 50,000 amps is crashing into this tower and goes off into the earth through this 10 ohm resistor. I need a licensed radio operator with this problem before me. Ohms law. Mr. Rukolo, KB2NYY. We got 50,000 amps through 10 ohms. What is the voltage across this resistor? Okay, the base of this tower is 500,000 volts above the earth in terms of potential. So if you're standing, for example, with your hand on the tower and full of the earth, you have the action. So there's your large potential. And that's for a perfectly typical average strike in a rather good ground. Now this is an isolated case. There's no other metal in the area. There are no other conduits or anything like that. But the numbers get scary real quick in a case like this. Hopefully we'll do that. But yeah, the coax gets to 50 amps. 50,000 amps, that's right. Let's turn this into a real life case. Again, Huntington County, the center of the county is 700 feet up. Good place to put a radio tower. And the county dispatch center for the 911 system is right in the middle of that hilly area. Let's have the 911 center with all of its expensive Motorola dispatch consoles in the building here. And let's have the old tower working over here and the new tower being put up over here. Now, this is a 300-foot tower that's going on. The contractor has just raised the steel up, and he's just running a temporary extension cord to operate the tower lines. Because there is an airport nearby, we gotta have tower lines. Okay, and he puts in a kind of a sleazy little single ground rod here, and wraps the ground wire around the rod, not very well. But he's sort of winged it as to lightning protection. Well, sure enough, of course, he's taken a risk, and sure enough, the storm comes out and the tower gets hit. Well, here's our 500,000 volts at the power base again. Not just harmlessly going off into the earth, but being set up in the Motorola dispatch consoles. This, of course, is the power line from the dispatch center being used to operate the lights. So all of a sudden, you have this horrific multi-kilovolt surge being induced in the power line in the building. And the damage bill was $30,000. Just because there was the contractor took a risk and there happened. Normally, of course, all this stuff can be bonded and routed properly to do on safety. So that's a real case. Now, let's look for a minute. Let's look down that tower itself here again. We're flying over. We're looking down. Here's the square tower. I claimed that the base of the tower was 100,000 volts above, 500,000. I'm sorry, above remote Earth. Well, as you walk away from the tower, the potential becomes less and less and less. And there's range of constant voltage as you walk into the tower. If this is 500,000 volts, this is maybe 250 and 200 and 100. Yeah, terrifically large voltages in the earth all around the tower. You see these horrible pictures of a herd of sheep, a flock of sheep that have gotten killed, or the sheep are spread over a feasible area. So the dangerous radius from this tower is several hundred feet if it gets hit. The funny thing here is that these rings of constant voltage hint that if you actually stand facing the tower with your feet on the same points on the ring, you're actually okay, because both feet are at the same high potential. If you turn your body 90 degrees, you are deadly exposed. But in principle, you can be safe in this horrible case by facing the tower, or by standing on one foot. It's amazing.
You can't do that.
Now, in the real world, they tell you not to take refuge under a tree during a lightning storm. Well, this is effectively a tree, and you get the same ring effect versus a lightning. Okay, that's a little basic physics. Now, what can we do about this? Let's take a typical suburban house here that's got 5 sources of lightning exposure attached to it. We have the power line coming in off the pole, going to the meter, and then having its neutral wire grounded to a ground rod here. Now, if this is a typical modern development, the place probably has its own water well, so there's probably not a steel water pipe going down the street. So this house has to provide its own grounding, period. You can't rely on the sea to give you ground. So let's assume a ground rod. Now, obviously there are other exposures here. The telephone line may come in overhead. And of course, the phone company provides a little protector on the wall here. Its ground has to be bonded to the ground of the power company. Has to, but as an electrical requirement. Likewise, the cable company comes in, and they have to have a little grounding block. Again, bonded. And if the owner of the house is smart, he will have run a ground wire from the base of the antenna down to this ground system where it is. And if he's a radio enthusiast with an antenna, they're actually smart to put in a lightning arrestor and tie its ground off to the house common ground. These are typical requirements for proper safety. If any of these grounds is separate, there are separate rods for the telephone, for example, then there could be big differences in potential between the 2 drawings. You can actually get arcs between the wiring in the house. So basic stuff, the code requires it, you gotta bond all this stuff. In the case of a hand tower, for example, let's put a tower in the backyard. The code requires it be grounded, but also that if the tower is next to the house, that tower will be bonded to this stuff with a number 6 ground line, big gauge ground line. So it all has to be tied together, and then you're relatively safe. Of course, nothing is absolutely safe, but these are basic steps. Now, once this really crude basic stuff has been done, there are some refinements that will help us get our sensitive electronic stuff through the lightning season. This is okay for fire protection and so on, but it's not to save the fax machine or the answering set or the computer or whatever else it is. One way to add extra protection against lightning surges coming off the power line is, sure enough, to put a protector in the power switch box at the entrance to the house. And a typical protector to do that is this guy. This is a plastic molding, costs about $15 at your electrical supply, and has 2 metal oxide varistors, MOVs inside. A varistor, a variable resistor, is basically a lighting protector. It conducts heavily if the voltage goes above the voltage. So this guy will short out the lightning surges and save you. And what you do is park this thing inside the circuit breaker box and simply tie one of its halves up to either of the 2 hot ones. And now anything coming off the power line will get harmlessly shunted off the ground, and that's the end of it. Your local power company will sell you this thing as a service for $3 a month. They'll stick yours up inside the meter box. It's the same basic part. Jim?
Just an observation. I have that posting with my house. You're talking about all on the average. What are the wires for the suspect?
Well, these are 14s actually. This is a big one. They will take horrifically large surges for a very short period of time. Several thousand amps for a few milliseconds. So, is it scary? No. But this is okay.
might I add that, I mean, if you do get hit and that does protect you, you gotta be careful because those can only take so many hits. And eventually they'll break down. So, in fact, you may get hit and you don't know you got hit. And that took up the surge. So, it might be a good idea to replace those on occasion, or at least after you suspect you got hit by a strike.
Every 10 years or something.
Yeah, it won't protect you the third or fourth time.
Yeah, they fail open, that's true. People allow their water pumps to get set continually because the replacement of the pump is covered by insurance. And it's $1,000 out to replace the pump, but it's paid for by insurance money, which comes from having to realize to pay for it. By contrast, a $15 piece like this will save the pump at the very start. So it's a pretty good
Mentioned water pumps, submersible pumps. I put them out when people susceptible like in the winter. And I have friends that have the contact boxes literally flowing on regular water.
Okay. A Brewster thing like this would save them. If you raise the cost of the pump at the factory by about $1, they don't do it. Moving right along. If you don't want to wire a real protector in like this, there are other ways to approach the problem. This guy is a little General Electric plug-in protector. It's got just a single metal oxide resistor built in across the hot and neutral wires. I'll pass this guy around. This is $7 or $8. As the diagram shows, it's just an adapter thing where the ground wire passes through, and the neutral and hot wires have this resistor protector across them. This is the same basic technology as you find in most computer circuit protectors. There isn't much to it, but it does help. The experience I had moving into Flemington was that we moved into this old house in an old district with old wiring, and in lightning storms, light bulbs would burn out. And terrible dimmers would fail in lightning. There's something going on here. And as a quick fix, I bought a couple of these plug-in guys, put them down in the basement next to the power box. There's an outlet that had one outlet on one of the phases from the line, and then the outlet next to it was wired to the other phase. So I had both phases covered as to protection against ground. And that stopped. 15 years ago, that stopped all the mysterious light burnouts and saved all the difference. So at that point, obviously we're getting some value from this cheap little protector. Now, Jim?
Yeah, I'm catching exactly what you're saying. What you're saying is when you plug in a protector that protects one outlet, it's really in effect protecting the whole house. Versus flashing down on voltage, it's all the same voltage.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's it's not as elegant as the wired-in protector because the reads a lot longer. But there you go, start shooting close to the source. Yes, I deliberately chose an outlet box that was 18 to 22 bucks. Okay. Now, this simple protector is helpless to stop surges that come in from both the hot wire and the neutral wire at the same time versus ground. It just doesn't work on that basis. Okay, that was 15 years ago with previous protector. A lot of things in computer read. You get the computer. I have one of these. I will store these guys down the basement. I also have a typical computer protector at the machine itself. I have Microsoft Word in the thing and DOS. I'm sitting there one night writing a story, and the lighting comes up, and the machine starts acting funny. I can't do edits as well as I could. And I'm starting to lose features. I can't control things. I can't set bold type anymore. And I can't change the margin width anymore. The more I work the thing, the worse the features get. The machine is slowly dying on me as I operate it. So, okay, save the file, come back the next morning, start up again. It's still screwed up. The software is still sick. But it's not a one-time glitch. Something has changed the software as I use the machine. I reinstall DOS, reinstall Word, back up, works fine for another 5 years. So something had gotten in there without causing any physical damage, but it sure made a mess out of the word processing. And therefore, what I now have, a couple of months after that, I went to a head test and got one of the big industrial type protectors that stop those surges from both wires against the ground. This is a superior electric thing it gives you a big longitudinal choke coil, two-winding choke coil, and two big capacitors, about 2 mics apiece. Well, this guy stops the wire-to-wire surges by the capacitors, and also stops the wires-to-ground surges by the choke. And there's been no trouble since then. This is like 4 years ago, I think. So, for really good protection, the big expensive box is a good way to do it. These things are $100-something bucks you have to buy it new. I got to think of the hand, but that's what I'm saying. So that's super protection. It's trouble-free. Now, as for us radio users, us antique people, yeah, we occasionally find old-time radios from the 30s where the antenna coil has gone open. Coco Cathedral used to be wired to the antenna, and back in 1937, a storm came up and zapped the antenna coil. And it's been that way in the radio ever since. We do find those cases. I've got a network of Kent that's been open for years. So old-time people got to be letting them just like you can today. If you want to have a little bit of fun, take your wire antenna and connect it to one side of a neon bulb, and wire the other side of the ground. Next lightning storm, strike 2 miles away will flash the bulb at your house. It's amazing. All kinds of stuff start lighting. It gives you religion real fast. The electrical code for us hobbyists is pretty lenient. I mentioned before that the code requires that we put grounds on our towers. That's obvious and natural and straightforward. The code also requires that we want to run our ground wires in essentially a straight line. You want a short, straight line ground without sharp bends. Sharp bends cause inductance, and we don't want inductance in something that's carrying a pulsing current like a lightning storm. So keep the bends simple and natural in large radius when they're hit. The code does not require lightning arrest for a receiver antenna. It may have sometime in the past, but the 1996 code doesn't. And it's as simple as that. It does require a lightning discharge on a wire antenna that's used for transmitting. But if the wire antenna has a ground on it anywhere, or if the antenna is fed by coaxial cable with a grounded sheet, even there's no requirement for lightning arrest. But the code requirements are pretty straightforward. And they don't do us much harm or good. They're very straightforward. So those are the crude basics on lightning. Any more questions? Bill?
I ran into a situation where I was trying to find a good grounding device for a long wire. And somebody found a good grounding device for a long wire, I couldn't seem to locate it. Everything was like set up for coax or was set up for twin lead, whatever I could find. And I threw one terminal, and I found out that it was grounding the antenna to some degree.
The question is what did you use for lightning arrestor, basically?
Yes.
A neon bulb is a start. Any little arc cap device would work. A spark plug, for example, would work. There used to be real lightning arresters you could buy for wire antennas.
There's no that.
Go around.
I purchased one. It's made by a company called Ice. And they make one specifically for long wire antennas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we come into the device, which then goes into the ground rod, and from there to your house, you put in coax.
This Radio Shack over there, that's just a long wire, but
This is
like what all Radio Shack does, battery, yeah.
Give me I'll give you that number. Give me a call, and I'll give you the.
Thank you, I'll see you, I really appreciate this.
Other questions?
This is about John.
All lightning arrest is used for long wires. How safe are they to use it?
Should be okay. They're pretty simple inside. It's full arc gas.
See, I don't want to compare those. Two ribbons and something like rounds, iron core, asbestos. I don't know what it is.
All you really have to do is test it with an ohmmeter, make sure it's an open circuit. And it should arc over multiple digits. You're not getting an anchor. I don't think so. Yeah, straightforward. It's a good idea, but it's not required. Let me
just leaving it disconnected?
Grounding is probably the safest approach. Leaving it disconnected is sort of okay. It's not cool bad. Depends on what you're trying to save. You're trying to put a fire or save the radio.
Without holding fire.
Yeah, grounding is the really slick way, obviously.
Let's say in the arresters, can you put a arrestor across that ground?
Yeah, you could. I suppose it wouldn't be harmful radio frequencies. It would probably work okay.
Pretty high resistance there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's no guarantee that that's going to be a high resistance at radio frequency. What we're saying is that the varistor has a high resistance at DC or close to DC. But yes, you don't really know. We have to measure it on a bridge or something to see what it's like.
Or just try and see if it screws up the radio.
If you notice a difference in the sound of the radio when it's in or out of the circuit, then obviously it's having an effect.
The other thing is if you use an switch, a single pole double throw, at the same time disconnecting the radio with the throw, then you're connecting to the ground.
Yeah.
So you couldn't get stuck on a range gap or anything antenna wire and ground at the same time.
Yeah, that's 1919 wisdom. It should work as well as it is. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, John.
Frankenstein. Has there ever been any research that's like harness lightning?
Apparently, if you add up the effects of all lightning strikes going on at any given moment, the supposedly equivalent of a continuous current of 1,000 amps flowing from the sky to the earth at any given instant. So obviously, it's billions of volts and thousands of amps. Potentially, that's a whole lot of energy. And unfortunately, that's distributed around an Earth that's 8,000 miles in diameter. Serious research, I don't know. It's intriguing.
There was a show on one of the science channels the other night, I might have not watched part of it, and these guys went out to this lightning storm, and they did a little rocket fall. Every time they would set a rocket off, lightning would strike. It would follow that. So they were, I guess they were trying to find some way where they could predict where it was going to strike and do some research. But just imagine if we had a giant dragon in charge.
Oh, hey, sounds good. But you got to convert a million volts down to 120. That's tough.
One other thing I'm curious about, if you have a battery-operated transistorized receiver such as a transistor portable there, the fact that that's not connected to the power line, does that offer any kind of isolation by being just freestanding if the radio doesn't have a ground, it only has an antenna?
It is obviously very helpful. It's not 100% certain because if lightning hits your house and runs down a lightning measure or something, there's still current induced within the printed circuit board. So you may lose the radio because of induced surges. But basically, it's relatively
So you're not working with a differential, not the differential, right?
right.
I think that's an RF discharge.
There could be ringing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, nothing is 100% certain, obviously.
It's an impulse.
Okay, thank you, folks.